dichotomy between the morning session, where there was a fairly professional demeanor in the courtroom, defense counsel asking very good, interesting questions of the witnesses about how they produced their evidence, whether they were being coached, etc. And then, as in the latter part of the day, we have another one of these interventions by the top defendant, Saddam Hussein, bringing forth allegations which are now going to be somewhat disruptive of this trial about his own treatment. And of course, you can imagine all of the political reasons why he may be doing that in terms of his reaching out to the overall audience in Iraq and the Arab world. But there also might be legal reasons why he's trying to interject that particular issue, whether it's true or not, into the proceedings to this point. I just want to point out to the viewers that what is so extraordinary from a legal point of view is Saddam Hussein actually being given enough opportunity to say all of this in the courtroom. He's in a procedural moment in the courtroom where he should be asking direct questions of the witness, who by the way, he and others have been deriding. And that's an interesting development in the trial, the way they deal with the witnesses and compare their own plight to those of the horrific acts described by the witnesses. But he should be just asking direct questions through the judge, and yet the judge is giving him an enormous amount of leeway, and you saw the prosecutor. Why is he doing that? Well, one has to imagine it's to convey a sense of extreme fairness, particularly to the Sunnis in Iraq, that he's giving Saddam Hussein and the other defendants ample opportunity to explain their grievances and their defenses even before their moment to do so.
That he's made these allegations, I was beaten on every part of my body and marks are still on my body, whatever the motive of this may be, do you think from a legal perspective as the trial continues that it warrants some sort of investigation?
Well, certainly you'd have to have an investigation of something like this. The prosecutor and even the judges would, I think it would be incumbent upon them to inquire into this and to have some sort of investigation. I don't know precisely what kind of investigation, but clearly it's one that is within the power of the judges to order in terms of getting the right people from the coalition forces, from the Americans who are in charge of the detention facilities, grill them very extensively about all of the procedures, grill the prosecutor, and see if there is anything to this. And there in itself could be a delaying tactic. It could be that defense counsel have coaxed Saddam Hussein to bring this out so as to create another delaying feature in the trial. But it's also that huge political issue of, well, look, you've got all these witnesses saying they were tortured back in 1982. Guess what? We're the subject of torture by the occupiers. And that plays as a huge political point, I would think, in Iraqi society, particularly among his sort of natural constituency, the Sunnis.
As we were listening also during the day to witness testimony about captivity and about torture, Saddam Hussein also said that those guilty of violence against witnesses that have spoken against them and him at the trial should also be punished. Do you see that as another tactic, really putting distance between himself and the alleged crime?
Yes, that's possible, but it also brings up, that's a very good point, Zane, because it brings up the other issue that defense counsel raised, which I thought was so well and professionally done earlier in the day, and that is, defense counsel asked the witnesses, well, why are you accusing Saddam Hussein? Why are you accusing Mr. al-Takriti, the former chief of the intelligence? Why aren't you lodging complaints against the actual guards who did this to you in 1982? Instead of these individuals who were simply trying to run the government professionally. And that was a very, I thought, good tactic by defense counsel, and Saddam Hussein may be trying to capitalize upon that by saying, well, look, if there were some camp guards who stepped over the boundaries here in treatment, then they should be investigated and brought to justice, not we in our, shall we say, lofty positions of government. What did we have to do with all of this?
David Sheffer, we're joined now by Christopher Reed, who is the regime crimes liaison at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. But before we go to him, I'd like us to listen again to what Saddam Hussein said.
Yes, we were beaten. by the Americans. And we were tortured. Every one of us. This one, they hit him with the back of the rifles until that he fell. Barzan, he fell. The bones of his feet are showing now.
Christopher Reed, what is your reaction to this?
Well, I think that what Saddam is doing is he's reacting to the testimony that we've had so far, just the incredible abuses to the people of Al-Dajail, and we've had, really harrowing testimony. We had our first witness who talked about being beaten so badly, the men, women, and children, that the men actually asked one of the guards to continue to torture them so that that guard, who had been kind to the women and children, could continue to bring milk to the children and continue to protect the women. We had that kind of testimony, and last time we heard Barzan al-Takriti complaining about his treatment and saying, the cigarettes I'm getting are terrible and I only get 6 a day. That kind of a complaint. So nowhere then was anything mentioned about being beaten or whatever. So I think these are bogus claims. They're designed to ambush the court, and they're designed to really play on or play against some of the testimony that we've had in the case so far.
As we were listening to Saddam Hussein speak, the audio kept cutting in and cutting out, raising questions about censorship. The court controls that, and gaps were coming in at key times during that. Who is controlling that? Is it the judge? Is it the U.S. Embassy? Who in the court is pushing that button?
Right. Well, the judge has a microphone on his desk, and there's a button on the microphone that says priority, and so that if the judge is trying to speak and one of the witnesses is speaking over him, he can hit that button so that he can be heard in the courtroom. And I think that that's what you may have heard today.
But there was a minute-long silence, though, when Saddam Hussein was speaking.
I don't think the judges...
It was a minute long. When Saddam Hussein was speaking.
I did not hear a minute-long silence, and I think, there are reporters in the courtroom. They'll report on what was said. I don't think that what you're seeing here is the judge trying to say, I don't want to hear about this particular subject. I think you're hearing the judge wanting to control his courtroom. And a judge in a courtroom anywhere in the world has a right to say, okay, I've heard you on this topic, now I'm going to talk, now a witness is going to talk.
So this censorship is not coming from the United States?
Well, I'm not sure I would call it censorship when a judge is trying to talk and other people are trying to talk over him and the judge hits the priority button on his microphone.
When Saddam is saying
certainly
he's
not
being beaten.
Coming from the United States.
Was Saddam Hussein beaten? Is he being beaten while in detention?
No. No, the claims are absolutely bogus. What Saddam Hussein complains about to his jailers is the type of food that he gets and things like that. He hasn't complained to the American authorities or to the Iraqi authorities who meet with him about anything like this. This is an ambush during court. And I think that it really results from the real testimony that we've had of witnesses who talked about a young girl having her clothes taken off and subjected to electric shocks.
Okay.
So it's a strategic move. It's a move that has nothing to do with reality or the truth.
It may be a strategic move, as you say, a bogus claim, nothing to do with reality. Nevertheless, it's been stated in court, and these are very serious allegations given the context in which they're happening. Is the onus still nonetheless on the United States to conduct some sort of investigation and to allow themselves to be open to questioning about this?
Well, there are two groups that have an interest in this. The American authorities, MNFI, has physical custody of these defendants, and the Iraqis have legal custody over the defendants. And so I think you heard an Iraqi prosecutor say that he'd been to the facility where these people are held. There have been other Iraqi government officials who've been to the facility and inspected it. And I can tell you, these people are living in conditions that are as good as the soldiers who are guarding them. They're eating the food of the soldiers who are guarding them. They're living in the same kind of quarters as the soldiers that are guarding them. So absolutely, when a claim is made by somebody that they've been beaten or tortured, that's going to be investigated by the authorities. It'll be investigated by the Iraqi authorities and the American authorities. But I can say that my point of view having seen the process, having seen the way that the defendants are treated, is that this is just completely bogus. And I think that you, in looking at it, should look at the timing of it, should look at the other opportunities that Saddam and the others had to bring this up, and look at the testimony that we've had and really make a judgment about whether it makes much sense to you.
Christopher Reed raising issues of the timing and the testimony that we're hearing. Christopher Reed, David Sheffer is in Washington. He has been watching the trial unfold and the testimony all day. Do you have any response to that, David?
Oh, yes. Chris, good evening to you. I just wanted to ask you very quickly, I thought there was a moment when the prosecutor rose and he did say, well, if you don't like the American detention operation, then I will turn you over, or we can turn you over to the Iraqi forces. And that seemed to me just to be going a little bit over the line for a prosecutor. He seemed to have a moment of emotion there that if he could replay that, he might not have gone quite that far. What was your impression of that?
Well, the judge in the case is really having to strike a balance, because on the one hand, he needs to keep the case going forward, and he needs to have the testimony come in, and he's been doing that. But he also needs to control the courtroom a bit. On the other hand, he needs to make sure that these are fair trials and that they're seen as fair trials and that the defendants get a chance to talk. Because of the way the Iraqi system works, after the judge questions people, he turns to the prosecution, the defense, and the defendants do get a chance to talk. I think the prosecutor's pretty frustrated right now with the leeway that Saddam is getting, and probably his frustration was showing today. I can tell you just as an anecdote, you know, when Saddam Hussein and the others were first arraigned before the court last summer, in the summer of 2004, they were distraught when they appeared before the Iraqi judge, and when they got back on the Rhino and on their way back to American custody, and they realized that they were going back into American custody, they were very relieved and they were very happy, because they really are getting the best treatment. I've seen the way they're treated. They are monitored. There's video cameras down in the cells where they're kept. I mean, really, I wouldn't have any problem with any of the way that they're being treated now, and I certainly would have a problem if the charges were true. The timing of it just makes me think it's completely bogus.
Christopher Reed, would the U.S. consider handing Saddam Hussein over to the Iraqis, to David Sheffer's point?
I don't think that Saddam Hussein's been asking to be turned over to the Iraqis. I don't think that the Iraqis are offering to take custody of him. Right now, there's an agreement between MNFI and the Iraqi government which says that the MNFI will keep physical custody of these guys for their protection and for their security, and also to prevent any sort of foul play by outsiders who might either want to harm them or help them escape. And I think that arrangement is going to stay in place during these trials.
Zane, can I ask just one more question?
David Sheffer, go ahead.
Chris, some time ago we saw published in London all of these photographs of Saddam Hussein in his underwear, and there was a pledge at that point that there would be an investigation of how that came to be, how those photographs were in fact released publicly, which is part of the sense of humiliation that Saddam Hussein keeps bringing up in the trial. Do we know what the results of that investigation finally were?
I don't know. I don't know what the results of it were, but I do know this. I spoke with the general in charge on the day that those photographs came out, and he was outraged, as was I, as was everyone else involved in the process. Showing pictures of someone who's incarcerated is a violation of their rights, and it needs to be investigated. And I know that process was undertaken as soon as it happened. I just can't tell you right now, speaking to you today, what the result of it was.
Christopher Reed, the regime crimes liaison at the U.S.
But I can tell you this:
in Baghdad, make your final point. Go ahead.
Well, I can tell you this, that if American soldiers took pictures like that and the investigation turns those people up, they ought to be punished. But the charges of beating and things like that, from my experience, from the timing of it, from the way that this has gone, just seems absolutely 100% bogus to me.
Christopher Reed in Baghdad, and from Washington, CNN's legal analyst David Sheffer. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Hussein.
We're going to take a short break. Your World Today will continue in just a moment. Stay with CNN.